I'm going to be going over step 1 of making a coil pop, but in a little bit different of a method than starting with a flat base from a slab. The reason I want to do this is because we are creating really smooth and rather small pots, and I want you to get a really nice base developed so that as we build these up, it's going to keep the integrity of the shape of the piece, and it's not going to kind of go out on you as quickly as one would if you were using a flat base. But it's good to learn a bunch of techniques. This is very traditional of the style pottery we're making, so I wanted to go in and do it this way. I have 2 pieces of clay here. We're gonna start with a pinch pot, but it's not going to be the pinch pot that you're used to. And we're gonna start rather small, because like I said, these are gonna be about yay big. What you're gonna wanna do, and your size will be a little different pending your piece, but we wanna go in and start to almost make a hockey puck pancake-esque shape. But you want it to be really smooth and really even. So instead of starting from a complete sphere, we're going in and we're going to just be working with half a pinch pot to develop our base. And I think that you guys will find it a lot easier, especially when shaping something smaller. I would work on this quite a little bit more time. Make sure you're really kind of compressing it, getting everything really nice and smooth. This is one I just made a few minutes ago, so that you could see, approximately how it looks once it's all smooth, even. Now, what we're going to be doing is a little similar to how you start on the pottery wheel, which is why I always like to do hand building before I do pottery. We're going to take our thumb and we're just going to push a little bit into the center. You're then going to go around the edges and start to shape it so that it almost starts to look like a donut. But you want to make sure that you're keeping the edges of the piece as even as possible. That's super important. So we didn't have to go in and open the whole entire piece because we're just going to be working with a partial pinch pot. So once you start to develop a center for this, and you want to just really focus, take your time on this. It's okay if it takes you a whole class block. Once we have that little bit of an opening, we're going to go in and we're going to pinch this. But rather than pinching just outward, we want to pinch up too. So I'm going to be just going around nice and slow and starting to create a pinch pot base. Now, a lot of these vases start very, very narrow on the bottom. So this is a really good technique to use to get that really narrow start and be able to really build up that more bulbous shape. And I know some of you are doing bowls, so I'll give you a few tips on that as well. So I'm gonna keep building this out. And then what I want to do is I want to establish a bottom. The reason I want you to pinch your little half pinch pot in your hand is so that you don't have a distinct bottom until you decide how you want to place it. So I like to start and kind of tap it on the table and start to look at what's forming. If you want it to go out a little bit further, we can go ahead in and just tap it a little bit more. So we have something like that. I'm then going to go in and I'm just going to work this a little bit out. And I'm doing this a little quick, but you really want to take your time because we want these to be nice and even. This is going to be your canvas for your entire project. So it's super important that you get a really nice, really smooth canvas to then go ahead in and do all of your detail work on. And once you start getting into coiling more, it just gets easier and you'll start to develop a lot of different techniques that work best for you. So now I have this, I started to form a base. The next thing you're going to want to do is go in with a rib tool. This is going to be your bestie on this project. And we're going to go in and just very gently work on forming a nice even base for your pot. And you could go in and smooth with your hand too, but I'm working rather gentle with this because I don't want to disrupt the shape I made. I just really want to go in and cut that a little bit more concise so it's going to be nice and rounded. If you are making a pot, this is going to be step one. I know it seems rather simple, but that's going to be step one for making one of your vases. For example, I'm looking at this one I'm going to go ahead and do. And then I'm also going to be going in and working on a stirrup style vase with a little bit more modern detail on it. So I'll show you guys all these as we go along. I'm going to plop that to the side. This was one that I completely finished. I went in, I pinched it up a little bit further, and I let it kind of set out for a little bit. It's really important with these to let the clay firm up a little bit. You could see this one, if I'm pushing it, it's rather flimsy. Now when I go in here, I have a little bit more control over the piece. So sometimes it's good just to let it set for, I don't know, a few minutes. And you could work on doing your coils in between that time and just get it nice and smoothed out. Now coils, we do not need to have really large coils for these. We want to keep them a little bit more petite because we're not going to be carving from them, so you don't want to have a really heavy pot. Go in, really compress the clay between your hands. The more of a coil shape you get it in right away, the easier it's going to be to roll out your coil. And I want to go over a few different things with applying coils onto your base, because when we did our other piece of pottery, we had a template for it. With this one, we're not going to have a template. We're going to be free forming it. So I really want to be mindful of where we're placing our coils. I'm going a little bit slow because I don't want to shake this camera. But remember, you want to use all your space. If you have a little piece like this on the end that gets kind of funny and starts getting your coil thrown off a little bit, just go in and take that off. So we were working with about like a nickel size coil before. I'm going to say kind of think more of like a dime shape with this one. I'm going to go into my base and I'm going to apply my coil. Now for reference, as you want to build outward, you're going to be placing your coil ever so slightly out. As you want to build inward, you're going to be placing your coil slightly in. And I'll show these more in class so it makes a little more sense. For this, I'm going to rest it directly on top because I don't want it to go out too quickly. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to smooth it out a little bit as well, and I think that'll be helpful. So I'm just going to go in, I'll use my rib tool to cut that, and then just line it up. So same exact style. With coiling, we're just working a little bit smaller. You want to make sure that when you're looking from the top, you have a nice even view, and that before you go ahead in and even smooth any of your coils together, that this ring is going to be completely symmetrical as you can get it. Because if that ring is thrown off, it's just going to make for a coil pot that's not going to be totally even. And these pieces are very even, very smooth. And like I said, it is a canvas. We want to get our painting on there. So I have my first coil on. Same exact thing we did before. You could see this is right on top. We're going to be smoothing the coils both inside and out. And I like to always start with the inside one first and break it up into thirds. So I'm going to use this. I'm not really drawing on it, but just kind of to show you. I'm going to be bringing this third down throughout the piece, And this is why it's nice to let your pot set up a little bit in between, because this is really, really easy to then smooth in and get a nice firm design. Because if you go in when you have a really soft base or a soft coil on top, it's gonna wanna start to go out on you. And I'm gonna give you an example. That is what happened to me. And I did this on purpose, but I was working on a plate here, and this is where you're gonna wanna be for a plate. But I attached this coil when the piece was really wet, and you could see that it kind of just flopped out on itself. We lost control of the ring here. It got really thin, and it just kind of started to flop out into a plate. And I'm gonna say it's not a very pretty plate. This one has a lot more control, so as we build it, we'll be able to get a nice piece. So smooth. And I'm just gonna smooth this one coil in. And remember, you really wanna support it. You could feel free to flip your piece over if you want to and smooth this way. Whatever's easier for you, just make sure you're not pushing too hard so that it's not gonna go ahead and stick to the table. Now, when forming these pots, we want to make sure that we're pinching the coils in the direction we want them to go. And I know that might seem a little bit obvious, but as we're attaching them and pinching them, it's going to be a lot easier to get the shape that you designed. So I'll finish smoothing that in. And now I have something that looks like this. And you could see it's a little kind of pinch pot right now, but I'm gonna be building up as I go. If you wanted to turn this into a plate, I would recommend a plate or a bowl. I would recommend starting out with a slightly bigger base when we tap it down on the table. That way you're not gonna run into issues of having like this really small starting point. And I'm gonna show you what I mean. So this is kind of step 2 of the plate. What I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be going in, you know what, I'll just use this one. I'll make a smaller plate. But I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna start to gradually pull this out. And you wanna keep turning it and pushing out towards the exterior, but very slowly and very mindfully. And like I said, you're gonna wanna start with a bigger base, but this goes for any pot that you're gonna be wanting to go outward. You can always go in and work from the inside as well as the outside. So if you're kind of like going straight up or stuck in a spot like that, you can really manipulate the clay inside to start to kind of bring it out. But you wanna make sure that you're doing the same thing with every section. So this might be a better start to like a small bowl or something. But I would definitely start with a much larger base and a little bit larger of a pinch pot when you are forming these. This one, I already started to kind of dome it in a little bit. So I'm gonna show you on this piece here, how you're gonna go ahead and do that. And once again, these are a little bit more firm. You could see how I'm kind of like waving it around. It's not like falling apart. If I were to go in and, you know, do that, not so great. All right, I'm gonna roll out one more coil. And I just want to do this to remind you guys exactly the importance of rolling out a nice even coil. So you're really going to be compressing it between your hands, making sure that it's almost a coil shape. And then rolling it out, making sure you have tons of space. I want to put all this off to the side. And you're starting in the middle and you're working your way out. Remember, you can always pick it up and squeeze it back into place if you need to. And I will post this in Google Classroom, especially if some of you are on your phones right now. We're not paying attention. So in order to start to bring a pot in, I'm going to take this base and I'm going to rest this ever so slightly in. And I'm just going to break this off to show you how it's going to look gradually. So they're stacking inward. And I want to make sure that this is really nice and even. I want to make sure that I'm cutting it off nicely so that it matches. Once again, because this is our canvas, we want to try to make it really nice, really even. We're not going to have any carvings or modifications to it really, except for possibly handles that are going to help us to kind of get it to look a little bit more even. You can always add in a little extra clay, especially to thin spots, and I really recommend doing that early on when you're doing these, or if you always want to start fresh on the first day or so, that's totally cool as well. The whole thing is just making sure you're getting a really strong base. Same thing, we want to support this. And I'm going to be smoothing it down, but I'm caving my hand inward to make sure that where I placed that coil, it's also going to be continuing that same thing as I'm moving it in. It's not going to be going outward. So by really holding my hand firm against this, keeping that rounded motion, I'm going to keep it in place. And this is going to start to give you that nice lift to your piece. Now, sometimes when doing this, even, if you're going in and you are trying your hardest, things still happen. You could still get some thin spots. And like I said, you could always address those by just taking a little bit of fresh clay if you feel like any spot's a little off and smoothing that in. I'm now going to flip it over. And I'm going to do two things here. The first one is I want to smooth this coil in. But because it's going inward, I'm not going to be able to smooth it down so much. So I want to smooth the base upward. And this is, I think, how we started the base in class for our original coil pots that we made. So I'm kind of just bringing that up. Make sure to really be delicate with it when moving it. I know this video is already getting a little bit long. But you want to make sure that you're smoothing it all in and it's going to be all nice and pretty. Now, this is where rib tools come back into play, because I'm looking at the base of this. It's still semi-even, but I really want to go in and I want to define this and I want to get a really nice shape. So I'm going to go in with my rib tool. You can use the plastic ones, you can use the metal ones, whatever works best for you. And just go in and really focus on defining that base to define your shape. And as these get a little bit bigger, this is going to be super helpful as well. I'm not applying a lot of pressure because I do not want to change the complete shape of it. I just want to address getting the bottom part to have that really nice even base that we started with. Now, one thing sometimes that's a struggle when starting out pots like this is that they'll start to flop out on you. So something that you can do once you get like your first coil on and you're super satisfied and you're ready to really go in and start to build your shape in and dome it into a vase, you could do two things. You could use paper towels, which the paper towels we have in class might be a little bit easier to work with. And you can just kind of go in and make them into a little rolled up piece like this and kind of like tuck it around to make a little base for your piece and go all the way around. Because I don't have the best paper towels, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to use plastic. And just by wrapping this, it's going to keep it in the same spot. I'm not applying too much pressure, just enough that it's not going to move too much. So now I have a really nice place to go ahead and work with. So this will be a really nice stabilizer. Like I said, I'd probably use the paper towels we have in class, but this will help a lot. So this is step one in getting started, making your base, making your first start of your pinch pot. I'm going to be working on these a lot more, and I will go into starting to really curve them in, starting to build a bowl outward, and then also how to make those stirrup handles.